develop, discover, and declare. So we develop ministries, we make missionaries discoverable, and we do it for the purpose of declaring his glory among the nations.
This is the Real Purpose Podcast, where we interview people and organizations operating with a real purpose and encourage listeners to consider where they need to start praying, giving, or going to live their real purpose.
Alrighty, well, welcome back, everyone. We've got a great show for you. So today I have a very special guest, a friend of mine, but also just a great man of God, Wes Strobel, the founder of the Barnabas Project. Welcome, Wes.
Hey, Matt, so glad to be here with you guys and your listeners today. I'm really excited for this opportunity.
Yeah, no, I'm excited too. I gotta say, you and I have talked personally about your ministry, and I've heard a bit about it, and I'm super passionate about it just from the little bit I've heard. But I'm just excited to hear more and hear the details about the lives that are being impacted from what you're doing. So thanks so much for taking the time. So
Yeah, man,
as we get into this, the purpose of this podcast is to hear more about great people who are living for a purpose as well as great organizations. So obviously we're going to spend a lot of time hearing about your amazing organization that's been created. But before we do, just tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your story? Tell me maybe a bit about your family. It can be whatever you feel on your heart to mention.
Yeah, Matt, absolutely. Again, thanks so much. Really excited about your podcast and what you're doing, showcasing ministries that have real purpose. So just a little bit about me right now, and then I'll go back into the past and bring us up to speed. 29. I work at my church as a worship leader and ministry director. And then, of course, I do the nonprofit really full-time on the side as well. And then I am married to Anya. And we just celebrated 5 years, and we cannot believe how fast time has flown. It is crazy, but it just keeps getting better and better as we just learn in marriage and learn how to just do life in ministry together. So that is awesome. We have a little dog whose name is Chloe. She's a King Charles Cavalier, and we are just obsessed with her and obsessed with her breed. I'm actually trying to convince Anya to get a second one, but we will see. We will see what happens in the future. So we live in Florida. We live in Lakeland, Florida, which is kind of in between Tampa and Orlando. I'm sure a lot of people know where Tampa and Orlando is. We're about 45 minutes from Tampa, which we absolutely love. And we love where we live. But I am originally from Western upstate New York in a little town called Lockport, which is where I was born and raised. I am a PK. Some of your listeners may be like, what's a PK? Other of your listeners are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm a PK. I'm a pastor's kid. And so that was an exciting life to grow up in and to continue to be in, of course. I've been in church my whole entire life. I've been around pastors and ministries and missionaries, and I've seen the good and I've seen the bad, and I've seen God just faithful through the highs and lows of all of it. And, as a pastor's kid, there's a lot that is involved with that. So at a young age, I just loved it to death. But then those terrible teens hit, and I went through really anybody who's a pastor's kid or has anyone in ministry or anyone who's a teenager can know. You just go through some dark times, right? And you just go through some soul searching, and you just really start to doubt, why are you here? What's the point of life? And is God really good? And so I went through all of that. I went through all of that really pretty hard at the age of 15, 16. So much so where I was just even doubting God's existence. I was doubting the goodness of God, and I was just doubting my family, and it took a few years for me to just work through that and work through my relationship with the Lord. And I really had to realize my relationship with the Lord had nothing to do with my relationship with my parents, my relationship with church, because I felt like the church world, to be honest with you, was just letting me down. And I felt like everywhere I looked, it was just a big disappointment, maybe some hypocrisy in the church, hypocrisy in the ministry. And I took those attributes that I was seeing and I contributed them to who I believe God was. And I thought that God was letting me down and that it was just not worth living for. And man, I just had some hard times where I had to really go through some searching. And I just remember being so upset at God, one time where I was just in my room and just crying out to God, asking Him to show me uh, what is truth. And
Yeah.
you hear crazy stories like this, and a hand on the Bible. I'm not making this up. And I just asked God, can you just show me something? And I had my Bible, and I kind of like took my Bible, and I kind of just out of frustration threw it on my bed. And I just went over, and I kind of looked down to see, what I was looking at. And I kid you not, Matt, the verse that had randomly been opened up to was the verse where it says, "Yeah, the fool has said in his heart that there is no God," or "the fool has said in his heart, no God," as some translations say. And in that moment, I just remember thinking about how foolish I had been, just putting all of this chaos on the Lord, and just
Yeah.
realizing it's time to kind of step up and step into the role which God created me for. And that's to live life with purpose,
Yeah.
which is the name of your podcast, which I love, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more too. So once I kind of got over that, I would love to say that it was smooth sailing from there. But man, life has a way of just getting a little crazy even in your early 20s. So after I realized, man, I'm going to live my life for the Lord, about 18 years old, I think is really when that solidified in my heart. Ended up moving to Connecticut at the age of 19 to go to Bible school, where I got my bachelor's in theology. And that's where my wife Anya is born and raised, in Connecticut. So I moved to Connecticut 10 years ago, went to college there, had a lot of ministry experience as well. I've done several missions trips. And then 2.5 years ago, we took a leap of faith coming out of the COVID years and decided to move to Florida, uh, with no work, no jobs, and my wife in full-time school. And took a leap of faith. We had no clue. I had no clue what I was doing. Felt like I was kind of driving our family off a cliff, but really just could not shake the feeling like God had so much more for us out there. And man, moved 2.5 years ago, and less than a year later, without any hope or promise, ended up joining our church on full-time staff. I'm now the worship leader there. I'm a ministry director, and Anya's full-time in our nurses clinic and is still doing school full-time as well. So uh, I just attribute it all to how good God's been, and how much He's just taught us to step out in faith and to trust Him even when it doesn't make sense. So that's a little bit
Yeah.
about my story. I mean, could spend so much
Yeah.
more time
Yeah.
diving into it, but just giving you a big overview of where God's brought us from and to where we are now.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I mean that's the heart of this. We want to get to know the people behind the organizations because there's always a great story there. I just before we move on to more organization specific stuff, I just want to call out, especially for the listeners to hear. I feel like your story reminds me a lot of when people talk about overnight successes. And I'm not saying Barnabas
Yeah.
Project is as big as you want it to be or your life is exactly where you want it to be. I'm definitely not saying that. I know that you have huge goals for what God has for you. But just like where you are today, I mean, it looks so great. Like from the outside, it's like, man, he just has like so much. Like life must have been so perfect for him along the way. And there's this common misconception that I hear of the overnight success. Like
Oh yeah.
one day everything just became great, but like nobody looks at the work and the hardship that went through, all those years before. So I just love that you took it back decades ago to when you were questioning your faith and you weren't where you were. Like I don't want people listening here to feel like I'm not where Wes is today, so I can never be there. Like
Oh
there's so
yeah.
many stories out there, and yours is such a great example of really like turning away from God completely or turning away from what they felt their purpose was completely, and then being able to turn back around and realize that actually they are able. And I feel like we can say it's lies from the devil that are coming to us. Our mind tells us lies day in and day out, and we need to work against that actively. And so I just love how, you got to this breaking point and God showed you, like only a fool, like if
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
believing, it's like, okay, if you want to call me out, then do it. So
Oh yeah.
I just,
Oh yeah.
it's such a great reminder. I think, we always see the surface of people's lives. It's really hard to get into, the depths of what got
Yeah.
them to where they were today. So thank you for sharing that and being open.
Oh yeah.
So now I guess, we know a little bit about you, but I also really want to hear about this ministry, the Barnabas Project. So let's give me just a brief overview of what it is. We'll get into more details of it as we go through, but I'd like to hear, just a brief overview of what the Barnabas Project is. And then I also, while we're still on the topic of you, what was your story about building this? Like was this a lightning bolt thing? Was this a long drawn out process? I want to hear how it came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you about the Barnabas Project and why we exist, and then I'll tell you how it came into existence. So we exist to develop ministries and to make missionaries discoverable, all for the purpose of declaring His glory among the nations. So Matt, you know this, I love missions and I love missionaries. So there's so many great missions and missionaries out there with real purpose, right? All over the world, but they just lack visibility. And us at the Barnabas Project, we want to put those missions and we want to put those missionaries right in front of people's faces, and right in front of the faces of people who have loving and giving hearts. The problem really isn't that people don't give to missionaries or ministries that are doing work with real purpose. The problem is they don't know what to give to, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't feel connected, and so they're not going to give to what they don't feel connected with. So we want to
Right.
bring missions and put it right in front of people's faces, almost like it's 3D, right? And so we developed 3Ds to describe our organization, and those 3Ds are develop, discover, and declare. So we develop ministries, we make missionaries discoverable, and we do it for the purpose of declaring His glory among the nations. So I'm going to
Love it.
dive into what those three things are, but I'm also going to tell you how we got there. So again, I love missionaries and I love missions. My grandfather was a missionary to South Africa. He was a missionary to South Africa for over 30 years. So, man, 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago, he actually ended up dying in South Africa. And he was young. He was only in his 60s, but he was just such an amazing man. And I had the opportunity to, of course, meet him several times. But he was such an amazing man. He was very active. He loved cycling. South Africa is known for having a cycling community. You go to Cape Town, they have a lot of cycling tournaments, and he just cycled every single day, and he did it avidly. And what ended up happening was he was cycling one day early in the morning, and he was riding his bike down the street, and then there was a small kid under 10 years old who was riding his bike actually, and coming towards him, and man, just in a crazy chain of events, there was also a car that was coming at the same time, and all three of them kind of passed each other at the same time, and there was no the roads in South Africa, depending on where you are, and they live kind of more in the rural area where the roads aren't as wide. Um, there was just no room for them to escape each other. And my grandfather and this young boy actually hit each other head on. And my grandfather flipped completely over that young boy and landed on his neck. And he broke his vertebrae in three places. And he ended up being hospitalized. And uh, he ended up becoming a quadriplegic. And he was in the hospital. And we would Skype with him, and he couldn't communicate, and he was actually learning how to communicate by putting the kind of like that stick in your mouth and
Yeah.
typing is how he was learning to communicate. And there was hope that he was actually that he was gonna survive. He
Hmm.
was just gonna be a quadriplegic for the rest of his life.
Hmm.
But what ended up happening was he contracted pneumonia in the hospital. And man, I'm not sure if you or your listeners have ever been to a third world government public hospital, but they're
Hmm.
nothing like what we have here.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing like what we have here. So he contracted pneumonia, and his immune system was so weak that it ended up killing him. And the crazy thing, Matt, that happened was uh, the day that he died, which is actually he died on the same stretch of road in a different hospital. But he actually died the same week that Nelson Mandela died, and on the same stretch of road. So my grandmother tells the story of she's driving to get to the hospital where my grandfather is, and there's just so many swarms of people who are just surrounding the streets to support Nelson Mandela.
Wow.
And so the day he died, Matt, I actually got home from work, and I got home and my dad opened the door, and it was just my dad and my mom and me in the house. And my dad says, "Wes, you need to come upstairs right now." And I say, "Okay, what's going on?" And he says, "Your grandfather's about to pass." So what I saw when I went up to my parents' room, I just will never forget it. It affected me so much. My mom had the laptop open, and
Yeah.
I looked at the laptop, and it was my grandfather uh, in South Africa taking his last breaths. And we were talking, we were praying, and I was just kind of sitting there as a 17-year-old, and I was just like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
Trying to understand everything. Going back to my story, just in that moment, still having seasons of doubt of my own faith. and
Yeah.
and and what ended up happening was, crazy. It's kind of like a movie, to be honest with
Hmm.
you. You heard the machine go off, and you heard someone say he's gone. and
Wow.
and and my mom just started crying on the bed, and I started crying, and of course my dad's trying to be strong, and she just said, "I just want to see him again. I just want to see him again. I just want to see
Yeah.
him again. Why God? Why God? Why
Hmm.
God?" And I saw that whole thing play out. And Matt, in that moment, God put a fire for missions and missionaries in me that has never
Hmm.
left me. A
Yeah.
year prior to that, I spent 2 months in Zimbabwe on a missions project. And when I came back, everyone was like, "Oh, so you're going to be a missionary now?" I was like, "No, just because I went to Africa doesn't mean I'm going to move there." But
Right.
when I saw that happen, I knew that God had missions in my life, but I
Yeah.
did not know what capacity.
Yeah.
Uh, in that moment, I just thought, if my grandfather can be a missionary for over 30 years, give his
Hmm.
whole life to ministry and missions, then it must be something worth living for. So I
Yeah.
went on a journey. I went on a journey where for several years, Matt, and you can talk to Anya about this. Anya and I fully believed with all our hearts that we were going to move to South Africa and become full-time missionaries. And
Right.
we planned that. I planned that
Yeah.
for over 5 years. When we
Hmm.
got married, told everybody at our wedding, we don't need any bed frames, we don't need any kitchen equipment, we don't need any of this, because in about a year and a half, we're going to be moving to South Africa.
Yeah.
And it's just not realistic for us. And uh, and then we it was our first year anniversary. I tried to go, ever since my grandfather passed, I tried to go to South Africa as much as I can. So I've been there 5 or 6 times. I can't quite remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Um, and then Anya and I, of course, we've been there several times together. But it was our first year anniversary. We were in South Africa in September into October. And Matt, we were planning to start a church over there with our aunt and uncle, who were more like brother and sister because they were just about 4 years older than us. And we were
Yeah.
planning to start a Christian school with them. And we were over in South Africa on our first year anniversary. We were looking at properties. We were looking at school properties, church properties, a small little campus. I remember being in Cape Town and just visiting the property, and we were like, man, wouldn't this be great if this was where we would start our ministry?
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna take a moment to share something that hopefully is not too real and not too raw for our
Yeah.
listeners. But that was a 2 week trip, and a week into that trip, we got back. We went to Cape Town and we flew back into Johannesburg. And as we were flying back into Johannesburg, we got back to my aunt and uncle's home, and and my uncle, who I was just best friends with, and really just loved him to death. In that moment, my aunt was uh, unloading the boot, the trunk, as they call it in South Africa, and she's found kind of like that the compartment where they keep the spare tire, and she noticed something was a little bit different in there, and she opened that up and she found a bag that was just filled with stuff that should not have been in possession of a Christian
Yeah.
or in possession of somebody who was going to be doing ministry. And I
Right.
won't go into too much details, but it came out that in that moment, it came out that my uncle was being unfaithful to my aunt, and
Hmm.
nobody knew about it, and it was just a spiral effect. And on our first year anniversary, we we're standing here and we're watching this and we're like,
Hmm.
what is going on right now?
Yeah.
We've been planning for 5 years to start a church and a school with my uncle, who's
Yeah.
just a few years older than me. And we were just looking at properties, and now this is happening. And we were so confused.
Yeah.
I felt so lost, I, that last week there was just really rough. We came back home to the States, and we took a full year of just asking God, what is going on? What do you want from us? And what are you trying to teach us in this moment? And we saw a lot of counsel. I got advice from pastors, from missionaries, from family, and there was some great advice, but there was also some people who weren't very helpful either. And in really tough times like that, where you're just second guessing everything, just stay close to the voice of the Lord and just allow Him to speak into your life more than the negative people. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
And so we prayed, and a year later we just believed that God didn't want us to move full time, and that He had a purpose for us in the States. And I didn't know what that purpose was, but out of that, um, enter enter the COVID years, and then during COVID, just coming out of that horrible season for us, and then during COVID, I was just praying, God, what do you want us to do? Continue to do missions work, continue to do projects. And I really believe that God wanted us to start a nonprofit and to call it the Barnabas Project. Barnabas means son of encouragement. And we just wanted to go to missions, go to missionaries, go to ministries that just needed help and that needed to be encouraged, and to do whatever we could to help them and to put them in front of other people. So that's how we got started. And we just went to missionary to country and just poured into them in any way, shape, or form that we could, whether it be through corn distribution in the Yucatan, to teaching, to preaching, eyeglasses clinics, and we would just did whatever we could. And then through the inception of the ministry, the Barnabas Project, we found this great need for missions and missionaries who are doing an amazing work, but nobody knows about it because they don't have a good website. They don't know how to use social media. They don't know how to film a high definition video with good sound quality. It's really hard to buy into something when you're looking at a pixelated picture that looks like it's from the 1980s, and you have somebody saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, this is what we're doing." I look at it and I'm like,
Yeah.
"I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not interested." You know. So
This
we
must
did.
be an old
We
website. this
yeah.
this must have been a ministry from the 50s.
You're working on updating that, right? But man, missionaries have such limited resources and limited capacity. I'm in ministry full time right now, and there's so much that goes into technology that people don't prepare them for. So we just started filming high definition videos, creating ministry overview videos, and started being consultants for missionaries and doing brand development, brand recognition. And the results have just been so positive, and the feedback has been so positive. And we were able to bring on a media director who just comes with us on all of our trips and films and does drone footage, and we're put these
Amazing.
videos together and these websites together, and we'll go into a little bit about that
Yeah.
a little bit later. But I just want to kind of pause and just see if I'm on track with what we're talking about or if I got off track. um,
No, no, that's great. And actually, I'd love to get into, let's get into a detailed example of what you guys have done. But before we do, I just want to kind of break down what you just
yeah,
said. There's a couple call outs that I want to make because I think it was a really good thing for the listeners to think about. The first one is you talk about how this story about your grandfather and how it transformed, your outlook for missions from there on. And I just think it's such a good example of, that happened. You said when you were 17, you're 29 now. It's been 12 years, and in that time, you maybe didn't necessarily start a mission minded ministry until just a few years ago. And I just feel like a lot of times we allow time to
yeah,
change what we feel like God told us. Like God made it clear to you when you were 17 that that was important. And I
yeah,
feel like that happens to so many people, but things could get in the way. Life gets busy. You don't really, answer that call immediately. And then
yeah,
you're 10 years down the road and you start questioning, was what he said then when I thought I knew it, was it actually that, or was it not that now that things have changed? And I just think like that, I just wanted to call out is so cool that you didn't let time break up what God called you for. So that was
yeah,
the first one. And the second piece that I wanted to call out was that God's a lot of times has a story that we don't understand.
yeah,
Like you had in your mind, you had to do missions, you're going to go be a missionary, like that's where you felt like God called you to. And God has a funny way of sometimes, I think, showing us his plan, maybe in ways that we obviously you didn't want it to happen that way, but you know, his plan, if you're faithful, is going to come out. And I just think like the Barnabas Project is such a good example of faithfulness allowing God's will to come out. Because if you had gone to South Africa, Barnabas Project might not be around. There might be a lot of
yeah,
ministries that aren't going to be changed because of you maybe going somewhere that you in your heart felt was right, but wasn't really
yeah,
part of God's plan. So I just love the story that you've told, really getting into detail about all of it, and just I think you're just a good example of flexibility and perseverance. Persevering towards God's will, but being flexible to what that will
yeah,
really is and what it looks like in your life. So, with that being said, I do want to talk about your great ministry, and so let's jump right to the topic of the day, and I'm going to call this topic "Creating Innovative Fundraising Techniques." And
love
I
it.
think what you did in Egypt and the story you're about to tell is just so great. Just being innovative and creating ways that organizations didn't have. You're building something for them, and so jump
Yeah.
into it. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited. So we had the opportunity of getting connected with an organization last year in Egypt and the Mediterranean, and I met the president of this organization, which is called Mediterranean Baptist Missions, through a mutual missionary friend who's serving in the Yucatan, who we're partners with. And met him over a Zoom call, and really was able to brainstorm with him and his organization and get connected with partnering with him and his organization. But they're building and planting, among many other things, they're building and planting churches, and they're headquartered in Cairo, Egypt, and they're building and planting churches all across Egypt, from Alexandria to Cairo and New Cairo, but also in the Mediterranean as well, in North Sudan and Israel and a few other places. So we got to go boots on the ground in January. Me and my media director Brad Brown, and I was teaching on a pastors conference there, where we brought over 30 pastors who were all stationed in Egypt, and just invested into them and their families, which was just a whole nother topic. But one of the purposes that we had going there was there was a plot of land which the organization had purchased for the purpose of building a church. Well, they
Mhm.
tried building the church for quite some time. They tried raising money for the church to be built for quite some time, but it wasn't happening. They weren't raising the funds that they needed. They were trying to raise $25,000 for the church to be built from the ground up. Don't you wish churches could cost $25,000 here in
Right.
the States? Yeah, and it's a nice building too. It's not just a block with a straw hut. If you go on our website, you can see a picture from a couple months ago,
Yeah.
which shows where the church is at now. But we went there with our media director, and we brought in drone footage, we brought in high definition cameras and good sound equipment, and we just brought in a couple different pastors and the president of the organization, and we just said, "Hey, you stand here, you go there. We're going to interview you here. You walk up these stairs that are hollowed out, and talk about how these are the stairs that seemingly lead to nowhere, but if we raise this funds, it'll be stairs that are going to lead into the sanctuary of the church." And we filmed interviews, we took pictures, and we gave that content to Mediterranean Baptist Missions and said, use this to raise funds for this church. Matt, less than 2 months later,
Mm.
they raised all $25,000. And that was in January of this year. The church is completely built from then until now. The funds were raised. And
Wow.
in January of 2024, in just a couple months, they're going to be meeting in that church. And that church is going to be filled to capacity. They already have a pastor ready to go. It's in a community where there's no good churches that are going to preach the truth of Christ. And it is ready to go. So for us, being the organization that we are and just seeing that happen, we are through the roof excited and through the roof just giving God the praise and glory that there is now a church that will stand the test of time in Egypt should the laws become stricter and they don't let us into the country. It doesn't matter because they're going to have
Mm.
that church, which is being led by national Egyptians, that is going to be fully functioning. And we were just so excited to be able to play. Really, it was a small part.
Yeah.
God did the big stuff, we did the little stuff. But
Yeah.
just to be able to see the fruit of what we did in January come to fruition, and that $25,000 raised,
Mm.
and now a continual partnership with Mediterranean Baptist Missions, where we were planning another conference and a couple other things in January, which has been postponed because of the unrest in Israel currently, but is being rescheduled to the summer of 2024. We are just so excited for what God did with that project, and that in January there's going to be a couple hundred people just meeting and praising God in the middle of Cairo, Egypt, in the middle of a seemingly godless land, and they're just going to be praising God and giving Him the glory. And we're going to be looking at that and just saying, God, thank you. Let's go do it again somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really wanted to share that story with the listeners and just let them know, man, it doesn't take much, but just do what God has given you the ability to do and just watch Him give the increase and give Him the
Yeah.
glory for it, man. It's just so
Yeah.
exciting for us.
Yeah. That's an incredible story. And I think, we'll get into how do we give to the Barnabas Project, but I mean, it makes me encourage, any dollar that I would ever give to the
Yeah.
Barnabas Project is going to end up getting multiplied. I don't know
Yeah.
how much it costs to put together that footage for the Mediterranean Baptist Missions, but I do know that it was likely a lot less than what it's going to impact
Yeah.
over the next few years. And so, like,
Yeah.
just it's so creative how you're taking funding and you're allowing it to multiply. Every dollar
Yeah.
that you give to the Barnabas Project can
Yeah.
be 10, 100, who knows?
Yeah.
Over time, having a better website, having that capability that you're offering them is it's there's endless opportunity. So I really enjoy, the creativity that you have here because it's something that does get overlooked. And like you said, there's people out there that are willing to give, but
Yeah.
they maybe don't know about the ministry, or they don't understand the purpose, or the website isn't really telling the story that it has to.
Yeah.
So Super cool story. Thank you for sharing. So with that being said, this is in the past. Would love to hear about. We always talk about a little bit of an organizational update. What's your outlook for the next maybe year, 5 years? If there's a timeline or a plan that your team has put together.
Yeah, well, we're really excited to be wrapping up the year. We did three major international projects this year. Of course, Egypt, which I just told you a little bit about. And then in June, we were in the Yucatan doing a project with one of our partners over there, doing some filming at a radio and training property, which is being developed. And I was just actually on the phone with our missionary partner who's in the Yucatan right now. I was on the phone with him yesterday, and he just told me the story about how he just sent the an ministry overview video that we filmed and produced for his organization. He sent that video to a pastor in Ohio, and the pastor was just so blown away. He's like, I've never seen a video clearly explain what's going on like this. And he said, Wes, he
Yeah.
cut me a check for $2,500 right there for our
Wow.
radio property and training property that we're in the process of developing. So just hearing the Egypt story and hearing that story, even just yesterday, it's just amazing. And then we were in Jamaica in July, doing filming for a Noah's Ark children's home, which is an orphanage that we're coming alongside, trying to create ministry overview videos for to explain what they're doing and to keep them going. So we're really excited to be wrapping up the year. That being said, the work is nonstop. We are in the process right now of actually we're in the process of forming a brand new nonprofit for a team. So we're doing all the legal work, creating the nonprofit, filing all the
Hmm.
paperwork for the Secretary of State in South Carolina, getting the board of directors ready for them, and we're just consulting with them and making all of that happen. And then that ministry is going to be called Reach Missions, and they're going to be doing an amazing work. And then of course we're doing a couple brand development projects right now where we're trying to do better brand recognition, and we're in the process of developing three websites right now. So we're always doing something.
Yeah.
But I wanted to give you an update about kind of like the 1 year and 5 year vision and long term vision. Um, Honestly, Matt, I would just love to be able to establish a team that does this full time.
Yeah.
This is what they do. As I told you, I have a full time job. My media director has a full time job.
Yeah.
I'm a worship leader. I'm a ministry director, very involved in our church. Our media director is a full time Bible teacher and ministry
Hmm.
director as well. And all of our administrative efforts at the Barnabas Project are fully funded on a volunteer basis. All the money that comes in does not go into the pockets of any individual. It all goes back, like you said, into ministry being done. So I would love to be able to long term 5 year goal. I'd love
Yeah.
to be able to be doing this full time. I'd love to
Yeah.
be able to start hiring people who all they do is website development. All they do is filming. I'd love to be able to have people on our team who I can just call, who can be our legal consultants for nonprofit
Mhm.
formation. I want to flip it on the script.
Yeah.
Long-term goal, I want to be able to develop a team, raise up enough funds to where we have a team that's just focusing on pouring into other organizations, if I
Yeah.
can steal your line, with real purpose to
Yeah.
make their ministries better. There's only so many hours in a day, and
Hmm.
we work our full-time jobs, and then we put in the early hours and the long hours at the end of the day and on the weekends and on our days off to make it happen at the Barnabas Project with these other ministries. But to our listeners out there, um, like Matt was saying, guys, if you're going to do anything that has real purpose, it takes time and it
Hmm.
takes going above and beyond, and it's not just
Hmm.
handed to you. And if this is all we can ever do and just do it with our spare time on the weekends, do it on our days off, and do it to this capacity, if that's all God ever allows us to do, Matt, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it with passion and with purpose. But I'd
Yeah.
love to be able to flip the script, and I'd love to be able to raise up enough funding to where we're doing this full time, and we are making differences all over the entire world for other ministries to be able to just do what God's called them to do because of what He's called us to do. And
Yeah.
that's our long term goal, 5-term goal, 5-year goal is to be able to just
Yeah.
do this full time and to be able to
Yeah.
pour into it with such a deeper next level tier, and to bring
Yeah.
other people on who are just who are working it with us. And
Yeah.
we are excited about what the future holds, and we're going to put in the hard work until we see what God has for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me, we've got listeners here that are interested. I know you've piqued my interest, and I am definitely an advocate for this organization, and we'll be keeping an eye and praying for you guys over the next few
Thank you so
years.
much.
But what can the listeners do? How can they get involved? How can they give? How can they be praying? What is it that you and your organization need from the listeners?
Well, absolutely. Well, we want the listeners to get connected. And
Yeah.
so, real practical, follow us on social media. Follow us on Instagram and follow us on Facebook. Just go in and type in the Barnabas Project, Barnabas, and you'll find us.
Hmm.
Go to our website, type in the Barnabas Project on your search engine, and we're one of the top to come up. So you
Yep.
don't even have to remember a fancy domain name. Just Google the Barnabas Project, and I think we're second on there after a book
Yeah.
which is called The Barnabas Project on Amazon.
But I
Not
think if
connected.
they do go, I think it's barnabas-project.org, correct? Just so
Correct.
they
Yeah.
know where they're going. Okay.
Yeah, barnabas-project.org will take you directly to our website. And at the top of the website, you're going to see a give button. If you just click on that give button, we're looking for monthly supporters.
Hmm.
To put it out there, we're looking for people who want to partner with us to make other ministries better. So
Yeah.
we need more monthly supporters to be able to continue to do what we're doing,
Yeah.
and we want you to get connected. Uh, Honestly, get connected, but also get involved.
Yeah.
So giving the money is great, but we also need people to do the work. So I mean, if there's a listener out there who's a graphic designer and you
Yeah.
love to be able to donate your time to
Yeah.
help another organization, contact Matt, contact me, and let me
Yeah.
know, because we're working on 3 branding development projects right now. Where two of them, excuse me, we have to create logos from scratch and give them a whole brand. We're giving them a whole brand package. The other one, we're updating an old logo. If you're a graphic designer out there and you just say, "Hey, I have this talent and I'm good at it, and I'd love to be
Yeah.
able to donate my time to help other organizations," contact Matt, contact me, and I'd love to be able to jump on the phone and have a conversation with you. If you're out there and you just know all about the legal ins and outs of nonprofit formation, you're someone I want to have in my phone. You're a contact I want to have as a resource. I love networking, and I love having contacts of people that I can just call who are also passionate about ministry and missions and nonprofits, and I can just call you and say, "Hey, I got this situation. I want to run by you. What's your advice on this?" And I'm trying to build our network of connections. So there's a lot for you to do more than just giving. If you're good at videography, if you're good at making videos, guys, we're doing a lot right now, but it's only getting busier as the years go on. So we are going to need as many people to network with as possible. But yeah, to be completely transparent, we need monthly donors. We need to up our support because it is expensive. Technology, equipment, drones,
Yeah.
uh, good cameras. We got to upgrade our equipment, and we have to get better microphones for our videos that we're creating, but that costs a lot of money. And so
Yeah.
doing this with you guys is going to be something that we are just really excited for your listeners to get connected and involved with. And
Yeah.
whatever comes in, we are going to be so thankful for, and we're going to put that all back out into the ministry to make that multiply, so other ministries can just do and continue to do what God's called them to do, but so they can get donors, so that way they can
Yeah.
continue to be encouraged and do what God's called them to do too.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You heard it. Contact Wes, get involved, go to the website, give. There is something on I think it's your Facebook page where it shows the email address that you can contact. I'm assuming that's a good place to, if you are interested in giving your time, as Wes had mentioned, there's an email and we'll drop it in the link in the show notes. So,
Yeah,
anyways, Wes, I mean, go
that
ahead.
email is info at barnabas-project.org. That'll come directly to me, and I'd love to hear from you, even if it's just an encouraging word of how the podcast was encouraging and hopefully inspired you to live your life with a deeper purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, well, awesome. Before we end, you already gave a lot of good tips. One of the great tips that I think you gave was don't think it's going to be easy to build this real purposeful life. Like it does take effort. But I always like to ask the people on this show if there was one tip that you had to give for someone to go out and live with a real purpose, or just a tip that's really changed the way that you look at your life and your purpose. What would that be?
Yeah, so this is something that God showed me a couple years ago, kind of in some hard seasons of just wanting life to be better and wanting to be doing more when it came to ministry and missions, but it wasn't happening. And I made the mistake of just kind of wasting a season of my life by wishing for a new season. So my
Hmm.
advice to you to live a life with real purpose and deeper purpose is, guys, don't waste the season that you're in right now by wishing for a new season. God has you in the season that you're in for a purpose. I love what Tim Tebow says, and he says you were created on purpose for purpose.
Hmm.
So the season that you're in may be a dry season, maybe a season where you're not seeing a lot of fruit, maybe a season where you're experiencing a lot of frustrations. But don't waste that season away by just wishing for a new season. Because here's the thing, that new season will come, but you want to spend the time, the hard work, the studying, the energy, the blood, sweat, and tears, developing yourself in the lull season, so that way you can do what you were called to do in a much higher capacity of efficiency in that new
Hmm.
season. And that comes from me learning that the hard way.
Yeah.
So I wasted I wasted several years. I'm 29 now. I'm young, but I wish I started the Barnabas Project 7 years ago, Matt, but
Yeah.
I wasted some time. So
Yeah.
I'm trying my absolute hardest to do the best I can with what God's given me, and just to spend intentional time with Him. I was reading a book, I think it was by Mark Batterson, and he said, "Hey, win the day, and if you could just get one physical victory, one mental victory, and one spiritual victory every day, and just
Hmm.
do that every single day, you have no clue where that's going to take you." So
Hmm.
don't waste away your season by wishing for a new season. That season will come, and while you're waiting for that, win the day. Every day get a spiritual victory, every day get a physical victory, and every day get a mental victory, and just wait
Yeah.
and see what God's going to do with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Wes, you hit home for me. This is something that it's kind of been like my motto for the year, is to live in the present.
Yeah.
And I can totally relate. I've wasted a lot of time, and there's a lot of time that I look back on. It's funny, you look back on your life sometimes and you think about a season that was really hard, and you still find great things that came out of it, or you still
Yeah.
remember great experiences that happened. And it's like, when I was in that, I thought it was horrible. But now,
Yeah.
like, sometimes
Yeah.
you want to go back to it because it wasn't that horrible, or there was so much that you learned from it. And so I think, like, this is something that previous guests, that this is a first for us, that you mentioned it, but I think it's so critical. And so thank you for sharing it. Don't I think one thing that I'd like to add on to it is not always thinking that the grass is always greener on the other side. I've spent a lot of my life always seeking for more, always wanting more. Sometimes you have to be content with where you are. And like you
Yeah.
said, don't waste where you're at. There's a reason you are in the job you're at. There's a reason you
Yeah.
are with the people you are. And yeah, maybe, I mean, we're talking about living for a real purpose. Maybe one day you're going to create a Barnabas project. Maybe one day you're going to start an amazing ministry that you've always been wanting to. But likely, if that was the plan, you needed to be where you were today to get there. And so
Yeah.
I can't tell you enough how much I like this tip, and I think it's something that the listeners should really be reminded of. So that being said, Wes, it's been great talking to you. I feel like we could just go on and on about the ministry that you've created, your story, but we'll end it here. A reminder for the listeners, we do match the first $1,000 that's given to the ministries that come on here. So if you go to Barnabas Project and want to give, just please make sure you mention real purpose or RP or something that alludes to the fact that you heard about it through us, and we will match that first $1,000 that's given. And I say this at the end of every show, but just whether it's partnering up with the Barnabas Project, whether it's doing your own thing, whether it's just living for purpose in where you are today, just make sure that you listen to this podcast, you go forward and, follow Wes's footsteps and go out there and live with a real purpose. So thanks again, Wes. Great talking to you.
Thank you, Matt. So excited for what you guys are doing. Keep up the amazing work.
Yeah.